Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Avery, a student rep from Mind Out Loud. Mind Out Loud is a student-led program, and many of the materials during the workshop are student-generated. The information provided on this platform is for general informational purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical or mental health condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking it because of something you may have heard or read on this platform. If you think you may have a medical or mental health emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Shruti.
Hi guys, I'm Shruti, a Mind Out Loud student rep, part of the Outreach Committee. Joining us for our February workshop today is Matthew Stevens from Design It For Us. Not Designed For Us invites students to look beyond the apps they use every day and consider the design choices behind them. By exploring how social media is built to influence behavior, this workshop connects platform design to youth well-being, attention, and identity in a digital-first world. If any questions come up during the presentation, feel free to submit them to the Q&A form that we hope to get to by the end of the hour. We will go ahead and turn it over to Design It For Us, who will be leading the workshop on Not Designed For Us, Social Media's Impact on Youth Wellbeing.
Well, thank you both for that great introduction. As I said, my name is Matthew Stevens, and I'm with an organization called Design It For Us, and I'll introduce myself a little more shortly. So today's presentation, the baseline is not designed for us, and it's about the social media platforms we use and how they are designed and how that influences our well-being. We're going to be talking about a few different concepts today and also diving into some of the really small details about social media, which is a very important thing to think about. When you look at these platforms and how they are designed very intentionally. And we're going to be exploring what that reason is and much more to really enable folks to think critically about technology. And this does not mean to be antagonistic towards social media, to be anti-technology or an anti-social media. Rather, to think critically is really just being able to look at it from different angles, including the different interests that influence the way that we engage with social media. So that's what we're diving into today. So as I said, my name is Matthew Stevens, and through all the different roles that I have, sort of the broad line name is that I'm a tech reform advocate. So with today's hat that I'm wearing, I'm the education and engagement lead for Design It For Us, which is an organization dedicated to helping uplift the youth voice in the tech policy conversation. But outside of Design It For Us, but in the space still, I am the co-executive director of the Log Off Movement, a Gen Z board member for the Sustainable Media Center. And at the end of the day, what I do is I'm a storyteller. And including this presentation, it's really about telling a story about social media. So let's frame this conversation that we're having today with just putting it in the context of what's going on in the world right now. I am a part of this movement and have been a part of it for years. And today I'm not talking so much about the movement, but sort of why is there a movement around responsible technology and reforming social media and AI? And so here is some of the news that's been going on that makes this topic so relevant this year, this month, and even this week. So right now out in California, there is a trial against Meta and YouTube that's all about social media addiction and how that has resulted in harms to young people. This is an actual court case going on right now. The head of Instagram and the CEO of Meta have recently testified just this week in that trial. There's also another trial going on against Meta, which owns Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, for harming children in New Mexico at the same time. Also recently in the United States, over 30 states have now adopted restrictions on phones in schools that primarily comes from the amount of time that young people are spending on their phones on social media in schools. And also in the world right now, very recently, you're seeing countries like Australia, Denmark, France, Germany, Greece, Malaysia, Slovenia, Spain, and the UK that are all considering legislation to restrict child or teen access to social media. So we're seeing right now there is a huge movement going towards taking on social media. And so today we're kind of exploring like why are we here now? And this is by taking a look at social media that we're going to understand this. So if you really want to be able to think critically about technology, there's these two concepts you really need to understand, which is the attention economy and persuasive technology. And for both of these, I take quotes from a person named Tristan Harris, who's the head of the Center for Humane Technology. He was a former design ethicist for Google. And his sort of big quote that like you'll hear most often is, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And this is for this concept called the attention economy. Think about all the social media platforms you use in your life. Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok, whatever it is. What's the common thread with all of these platforms? The answer is that they're free. But if these are businesses at the end of the day, how are they making money if they are just giving away the product? Well, the truth is that these social media platforms aren't the actual product. If anything, it's more like the packaging of the product. It's the real business behind social media is advertising. So the real product is your attention, because attention is a limited resource. There's only 24 hours in the day, and there's only so many things you can focus on and give your attention to in the day. And there's so many things that are competing for your attention. It could be school, it could be work, it could be family, it could be exercise, personal wellness, reading a book. But it's also the time you spend on your phone and the time you spend on social media specifically. So every social media platform that exists is competing for your time and attention. And the reason why is because the more time you spend, the more revenue they can get through advertising. And I'll explain that process momentarily. The other side of things, you have persuasive technology, which goes along hand in hand with the attention economy. And Tristan's quote is, "I'm an expert on how technology hijacks our psychological vulnerabilities." Because persuasive technology isn't about forcing you to do something, but nudging you in that direction, because it exploits how our mind works and how reward systems work in the brain, and it tries to encourage certain behaviors. So this is built into these social media platforms, into their design to influence your behavior. And it uses that psychology to influence the behavior of engaging with the platform. It tries to keep you online for as long as possible. And they do this through features like infinite scroll, autoplay, and push notifications, which is something you may not think about, but I'll get into in a little bit why these different features actually have an impact on your well-being. So I think it's important that I kind of put in context, this is how the actual business model works. It's a series of auctions. Social media is like a digital auction house. And I'll use Instagram as an example, only because I think it's great and a lot of people really can visualize it mentally in their minds. So about 1 in 4 pieces of content that you'll see in your Instagram feed is a paid advertisement. But the ads that you see there, it's not random. It's not just like, oh, I'm just going to put this ad here, there, here, another one there. And oh, we just got ads. What they really show is every ad that you see is actually the winner of an auction that happened in real time, because a company actually paid for the chance for their ad to be shown to you in that very moment. And the reason for that is because in auctions, you have what are called lots. That's the item being sold. Your lot in the auction, that spot in your feed was chosen because of your likelihood to engage. And that's because of the first major piece of persuasive technology. And I think it's one of the most fundamental if you want to talk about social media. And it's the algorithm. Algorithms are sort of like a calculator. Based on whatever inputs you put in, you're going to get a certain output. Now, social media algorithms are goal-oriented, and their goals are maximizing engagement and profitability. And so there's two sides of the same coin. This is the algorithm that personalizes your feed. It's the one that's giving you the cooking videos or the funny cat videos or the great memes, all these different content, all these different pieces of content that you have for enjoyment. It's also used, that same algorithm, to optimize your attention for profit. And it does it by collecting data and then putting it through itself to say, okay, this is this person's interest, what we believe is this person's interest. So if I give this piece of content, they are most likely to engage with it. And this will keep them online longer because you're going to engage more with content that you like, which is going to extend your stay on the platform. So this design of social media and the content you see, it's not neutral, because when attention equals revenue, the design choices start serving engagement first. So some of the features that I mentioned before, I'll go into a little more detail about. So like infinite scroll, this is just how you can keep scrolling on social media and there doesn't seem to be an end to it. There is no natural stopping point, so encourages excessive usage. You don't have any barrier there. You can just keep going. So why would you give it up? Then you have pull to refresh, which is where you go onto your screen and you just pull down, and that's when it refreshes your feed. That's actually designed to simulate a slot machine because there's this concept called intermittent variable reward, which all that means is you're not going to get a win every time. Just like if you're gambling, you're not going to always get the jackpot. You're going to get stuff that you don't like. You're going to lose from time to time, but every once in a while, you'll get that win, which makes it extra satisfying. And so every once in a while on social media, you'll get that really good post. And that makes you want to stay on more because you're like, oh, I want to see the next one. I want to see the next one. And you keep going, even though there's all these losses in between. Then there's autoplay. This is just where you watch a video and then after it's done, it goes on to the next one. It just reduces the amount of decisions you have to make. There's less friction to continue. Okay, I need to go do my homework. I just watched one episode. When that episode's up, oh, it already started the next one. Okay, just one more. And it keeps going from there. And then there's engagement metrics. This is stuff like likes, comments, and shares, and views, where everyone sees those numbers. And it turns social validation into a game that people are really active in and very competitive for. Who can get the most likes? What post gets the most likes? And people are fighting for that, which keeps them online for longer. And then lastly, there's push notifications, which is, think about it. You're sitting at home, at school, wherever, and you get that little notification and you're like, ooh, I wonder what it is. I wonder what it is. And then you check it out and you go onto the platform. And usually when you go onto a platform, we all know you're not going there just for that one thing. You're going to scroll for a little bit longer. And so push notifications are just like, hey, don't forget about me. Think about all these things you're possibly missing out on. This could be your friend's vacation photos. This could be a big opportunity or something like that. Come back just for another moment, or else you might miss out on something. And that's the fear of missing out. And that's how push notifications are designed. It's like Pavlov's dogs, where they're taught to salivate at the sound of a bell. These notifications are teaching us to salivate just to go back in for social media. So there's sort of a cycle here that goes on. And so you have this algorithm which personalizes the content in your feed, which is supposed to increase your engagement because it's the videos you like. And the more you engage with the platform, the more data it collects. It's looking at how long do you watch a video? Did you like it? Where are you looking on the screen? Did you share it with someone? If so, who? What account is it from? And so it collects all this different data so that they can better target advertisements to you that you are more likely to engage with, so that they can get more revenue, which they can then use to refine the algorithm even more. And it just continues on like that. But there are real impacts to the way these platforms are designed. And so these next few slides are dedicated to like, what actually happens here when we have this system, and what are we actually seeing with the young people who are growing up in these social media platforms. So the folks at Children and Screens, they did this report about what happens to attention. And they said screen time is related to less stimulation of executive functions, less reliance on imagination and visualization, more interruptions, and greater attention load. So what does this actually mean? Because this is based on actual research. First, your ability to use your own memory and also the ability to detect errors is reduced when you're using screens. Your visual thinking is reduced. Whenever I think about things, I'm seeing stuff in my head, and that's reduced when you're looking at screens all the time. It's also easier to be distracted. There's so many different stimuli on social media, all these different colors, all these different posts, all these different feeds that you can go to. It is so easy to be distracted. And then you get notifications too, which are trying to pull you in a certain way. It's the same thing. And then also the last part about attention load is simply that to be able to complete a task requires a lot more of your attention when you're using screens than otherwise, like if you were just using a pen and paper, for example. Now, what about identity? This is another part. So I'll include a not so fun fact. And the reason why is because the like button plays a huge role in shaping identity in the modern world. And so the like button was introduced back in 2009 on Facebook. And there's been a few things that kind of came before it. But the like button, like we know today, came about in 2009. So it's been around for 17 years now. So some of the things that we see with identity is social comparison is thrown into hyperdrive. It's natural as humans to compare ourselves to one another. You have role models or people you're like, wow, I want to be more like that person a little bit. That's a natural thing in the world. But social media takes it into hyperdrive. And especially when the images we see on social media are so artificial with filters and editing, it's unrealistic expectations. And so this leads to stuff like body image concerns. And for example, there was a study that found that Meta conducted, and they found that 1 in 3 teen girls feel worse about their body image after using their platform. And in the same sense, when you have these body image concerns, you're thinking, oh, I think I should be skinnier or whatever. That can lead to the development of eating disorders or dangerous eating habits. On another side of things, you have identity as a performance. Think about the impact on social relationships. Social media content isn't just filtered in terms of like, oh, this is the visual they're putting up, like, oh, I cleaned up my face to cover up my acne or whatever with a filter. But it's also, we only post the highlights typically of our lives. We're not posting the full picture. And when we think about our relationships, we're posting everything online. So what are we talking about when we are in person? What is our identity? Yeah, I know you went on a vacation. You posted the pictures from the Caribbean or on that cruise or when you went out to the mountains. I already know that. So you lose that real relationships with one another simply when we aren't having real conversation anymore about it. And then there's metrics as validation. This is the whole looking at, oh, how many likes did I get on this post? And that can make people feel really bad. Oh, I didn't get enough likes. People must not like me. You're not good enough. You're not being good enough. It can be a very dangerous game when we allow these platforms just to quantify our lives in so many different ways. And lastly, youth well-being. And this is probably the most extensively studied side of things. So the impact on sleep. What it comes down to is that when you use a lot more social media and electric devices around bedtime and when you wake up, your sleep quality goes down and also the amount of sleep you get goes down. Anxiety and depression, and this comes from a Surgeon General's advisory. I have a photo of it here, which this was a huge moment in 2023. The Surgeon General of the United States, who's like the nation's doctor, put out an advisory about the impact social media is having on youth mental health. And he cited research that says young people who spend 3+ hours per day on social media face double the risk of poor mental health outcomes, such as anxiety and depression. And then once again, you have stuff like FOMO, which is the fear of missing out again. And it has a huge impact on relationships. You want to be constantly up to date, but at the same time, using the digital world to stay up to date is counterproductive because you're not building those true relationships. There's no depth to these relationships that we build on social media as compared to the ones that we were making in school and actual shared physical spaces. And so when I think about like a solution to that, I think of this idea called JOMO, which is the joy of missing out. It's great to not be constantly up to date with every single thing going on with every person in your world. Because when we spend that time together in person synchronously, or even if it's on something like a phone call or a video call, it's a lot more rich conversation. You get to build a lot deeper bonds than if the way you stay up to date is through social media. At the end of the day, these platforms were not designed with the adolescent brain development in mind. But that's actually kind of a wrong way to think about it. Because they were exactly designed with the adolescent brain development in mind. Because it's designed to take advantage of that. So the best way to look at it is that these social media platforms, they were not designed with young people's real interests in mind. And I say real interests because they think they know our interests. That's the whole purpose of these algorithms, is to identify your interests. But it's just inferred based off of certain data that it collects. It's not necessarily your real interests. A lot of the content young people are being served aren't necessarily what they really like. It may just be a reflection of a moment. I know young people who have turned to social media as a coping mechanism. And so they might like a post or look at a post a little longer that's relating to their feeling, but it's not because they want to feel that way. It's just that it seems like it recognizes them in that moment. But then it sends them more content that drives them further down that hole that they were already in. So it's not their real interests in mind. So at the end of the day, it's important to keep in mind that these platforms, they're not designed for us. They're designed to maximize profit. So take a moment, and I'm asking this rhetorically, but just imagine, what would better social media platforms look like? What would social media platforms look like if they were designed with young people's interests at heart? And so, for example, imagine a social media platform where you couldn't see somebody's likes or how many views a video got. Would there be such things as viral videos anymore? What if we weren't constantly getting flooded with all these notifications that try to pull us back in, or these algorithms that force feed us content that they think we should see? Just imagine that. So now that we've talked about, and we're getting towards the end here, there's sort of three levels of response to this information that we've talked about today. There's the level of personal awareness. We understand the incentives now. That's sort of the purpose. That's kind of the goal. If you understood this presentation, if not, we have a Q&A at the end, so definitely be sure to ask questions. But if you've looked at this and you'd be like, okay, I can understand how social media is designed in a way that may not be necessarily the best for my mental health, then you're aware of it. That's a good thing. 'Cause when you're aware of it, you're able to question it more. And one activity that me and my friends like to do every once in a while is we do something called a power scroll, where we go on a social media platform and we just look at 10 different posts. And for each post, we think about the why. Why am I seeing this? Do I want to be seeing this? Do I want to see more or less of this type of content? And you just think about it. And you do that for 10 posts and just see what happens. On the second level, you have cultural norms. I think it's great, the idea of not being available 24/7, especially when we find that social media interferes with a lot of essential activities. I mean, that's why we are seeing all these schools start to move to phone-free schools, because it's interrupting school, both in the academic sense, but also in the social settings. That's why schools are doing bell to bell, because if sometimes it may even be more important to have the phones away at the lunch table. Because then you're having real conversation. You're developing social skills that are critical to life. But that's not always thought about with social media, because we constantly get those notifications. I need to check this in this moment, because that's what we're trying to do with social media. So as we understand this information and know that social media is designed to keep us engaged for as long as possible, we can shift that norm to say, okay, I need time away from my phone. I'm going to start with making sure I get 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep at night. I'm going to make sure that when I am in classes or at school or at work, that I have my phone away, except for maybe these set times, like if you have a lunch break or in between something. And just adopting boundaries in general with your social media usage. Set time limits and try to stick to them. It can be difficult, but it's good to start setting boundaries. When I am in the kitchen of my house doing phone-free zones, I will not have my phone here. Just adopting boundaries can be a huge shift for people. And then there's the third level, which is structural change. If we truly understand this information and we start to realize that it's these platforms that are responsible for these harms being caused, because it's the design of their platforms, we can have policy conversations about what do we do about that. Is it about restricting access? Is it about regulating the actual design of these platforms, which is a huge conversation taking place, and we're seeing tons of legislation being actually passed that's saying, okay, social media platforms, you can't be doing these certain design features that are known to addict children. There's also platform accountability. That's what we're seeing with all these court cases and lawsuits, is platforms actually being held accountable for the harms they've caused, because we understand that it comes from the design. It's not necessarily someone's individual behavior. It's part of a greater system that is pushing these harms onto them. And it's a way for us just to think about ethical design. That exercise question that I shared earlier, just imagine what it could look like. And we can work towards that when we understand what's wrong with social media. We can create platforms that resolve those problems. So I mentioned this a little bit before, but at the end of the day, we got to stop thinking that because I'm spending so much time on my phone, it's a matter of self-control. It's a matter of will, because you're up against a system that is had millions of dollars poured into it that says stay on for a little bit longer. It's hard to push back against. So at the end of the day, it's less that you need more self-control, and really the conversation is you deserve better design. You deserve platforms where people are put over profits. And that's really it for this presentation. So now I want to thank Mind Out Loud for hosting this workshop and allowing me to come speak today. And we're going to open it up to the Q&A portion of tonight's conversation.
Thank you, Matthew, for the amazing presentation. We'll go ahead and ask our speakers questions from the Q&A form now. If more questions come up while we're going through them, feel free to submit them to the form still. Okay, so our first question is, what is the most important thing you've learned from analyzing harmful designs in social media?
I think the biggest thing that I've learned from really looking at this is just that idea that it's not our faults that we spend too much time online. When I was a little kid, I spent a lot of time on YouTube. I was an iPad kid growing up, which I know is a term that is like used to antagonize people these days. But I was an iPad kid growing up, and I would watch YouTube videos all the time. And it got to a point where I would actually fall asleep on top of the iPad, and the videos would just keep playing all night long. And so when I started to question, why am I spending so much time online? Why does it seem that I can't go to sleep at night without my device? And I started to look into it. I'm like, this isn't necessarily like, this is not all on me. There is a system that's behind this. And it's because of features like autoplay and infinite scroll, how this can just go on forever. That's just dragging me into. So when I realized that there was a problem and I wanted to do something about it.
I love that. So our next question is, are there specific features that research shows most affect youth attention, mental health, or self-image?
I think one of the biggest features that I've seen that has had that impact that we've really identified is the idea of likes, but also the algorithm at the same time. Because like I said, when you like a post, that gets added to the algorithm and it'll start showing you more of that kind of content. This is something you could see in real time. Today there was a video of this little monkey that's all over the internet right now, and I liked the post. And then all of a sudden I just started seeing a ton more content about this little monkey. And you may be thinking, how does that tie to mental health? And where it comes down to it is you are feeling a certain way. Man, I saw this post of this model on social media or this influencer on social media. They look really good. I want to look more like that person. And so you like it. You're like, wow, I you look great. I want to look more like you someday. And now social media is going to start sending you a lot more content about that. And then you start thinking, why don't I look like that person? I'm trying all these things that they're pushing in these videos. I'm doing these exercises and I'm doing these diets, and it's just not working. And so that starts getting into body image concerns when you start really thinking, well, why can't I do that? Why can't I? And then you get pushed in doing more dangerous things like not eating at all, or extremely dangerous eating habits and diets, or over exercising. And that can have a huge impact on both your mental health, but also your physical health at the end of the day. So I think between the algorithms and just engagement metrics, that's probably the most significant one that I've seen. And I think the research seems to support that.
And our last question is, how can students advocate for design changes in apps they use every day?
So for those who want to get involved, there's a couple of different ways to go about it. And I like to say that there's kind of two sides of the space that I'm a part of. There's the digital wellness side, and there's the responsible tech side. Both say we have these platforms that are not designed with our interests at heart, and there's something that should change about that. And on the digital wellness side, it'll say, okay, what are certain things that I can do to help reclaim control over my social media experience? And this may be different apps. This may be different habits you can pick up. It could be becoming part of a social group. There are tons of organizations that are popping up around the country and around the world right now that are simply dedicated to having spaces for young people to come together and do stuff together or talk about social media and their own experiences together. So that's one side of things. But then you also have the responsible tech side. And on the responsible tech side, they say, we want to get policy done about this. And as young people, we can all be a part of this. You can look up online, whatever state you are from, and social media policy, and there is very likely to be some policy that's out there right now. Now, whether it's good or not, that's up for debate. But there are actual policies out there. And if you see a policy solution, you think, I think that's a good thing, there's lots of things you could do. You could write a letter. You could call your representative. If you have the means, you could go meet with them in person. I think it's so important that young people are part of this conversation because we are, and you may think, well, young people, we're not experts. We don't, we haven't studied persuasive technology. We haven't studied social media in this sense. But we kind of have in a way because we're experts of our own experience. We have grown up in this system. And if you share your story with legislators, that is extremely powerful. There's this whole thing about legislators not being in touch with the general public. But the truth is, when it comes to this issue, yeah, they may not have grown up with the social media platforms or had the same experience that you have. But also something to keep in mind is a lot of these legislators that we have in this country, they're parents. There are young people that they engage with regularly through family and friends and supporters. So they may have seen this. I've met with legislators and they go, well, my kids are a little too old for social media, but I keep seeing my grandchild and they're constantly on this, app Snapchat. And then I would talk with them more about it and then we can have an actual conversation so everyone can kind of relate to this issue. So sharing your story can go a long way. And this may sound weird, but if another way you can help create change and push for change is sharing your story on social media. And you may be thinking, okay, we're talking about getting people off of social media a little more and using social media more intentionally. So why would I post on social media? Because the people that we're trying to reach out to are the folks that feel stuck on social media, the ones that feel like they can't get off. And so you reach out to them through social media, and it's incredibly powerful.
Great, Matthew. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. Please fill out the feedback form in the chat to let us know how we did and help us improve future sessions. Visit our website to join our future monthly workshops. Thank you for joining. Bye.